Hello, and welcome to this special episode where we're going to be talking to an amazing lady who has started a charity that Mum and I are actually ambassadors for and are very happy to help out. And it is called Four Voices, and the amazing lady is called Jo West. Welcome, Jo.
Thanks for having me, Laura. It's amazing to be here.
Hello, I'm Laura, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
And I have to apologise. I have tried to sync this interview for a few times, and this is the actual first chance we've got to join up because my calendar's a nightmare and I've just stuffed it up. So Jo is the most patient person I've ever met in the world, just so everybody knows to start with. But I'm just going to let you know a little bit about Jo. So she founded Four Voices in 2020 after working with disadvantaged people in both Australia and Cambodia. Jo has worked with thousands of women silenced by toxic relationships and work or family environments. Four Voices, the charity that she's found, provides a unique service to the community, providing women in crisis immediate connection with no appointments, no deadlines, and no judgment. Jo is a compassionate leader with significant experience as a CEO, and as the former CEO and executive director of Orange Sky Australia, she is driven by the need to help women impacted by domestic violence, homelessness, and loneliness, helping them find their voice. And before we get started, wow, what a bio. But just be aware, everyone, that we will be talking about domestic violence, homelessness, and financial hardship. So this is a trigger warning. If you feel that you are being triggered, you can call Lifeline or you can also call 1-800-RESPECT. Wow, Jo, you've done a fair bit. You've been around.
Well, I've been around for a few decades, so you get a chance to amass a bit of experience, I guess.
Yes, so you've come from all of those spaces and moved into Four Voices. What pulled you there? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, well, as you said, I was working with my son who founded Orange Sky. That was about 10 or 11 years ago now. And he and his best mate, who threw 2 washing machines and 2 dryers into the back of their old van, and who incidentally didn't know anything about washing clothes. I can tell you that about my son. But they wanted to wash and dry clothes with people that were experiencing homelessness in Brisbane. And I don't know if your listeners heard or have heard the story about Orange Sky, but it catapulted into the Australian public space because it was just something simple and something unique and just really resonated, I guess, because the organisation, it's all about restoring people's self-respect and dignity through the provision of clean clothes. But the magic of Orange Sky is really about the connection that occurs between regular volunteers and people experiencing these hardships. And many people experience these things alone, without connection, without conversation. And where this morphed for me, apart from learning some incredible stuff about homelessness and meeting some incredibly resilient and courageous people who live on the streets, I also learned that the power of a conversation can be quite transformative. And I also learned that there's a lot of services out there that cater for homeless people, but a lot of women don't actually access those services. And when I went and did a bit of digging, I saw that 2/3 of the women who are homeless in this country are homeless because they've fled domestic violence. And I just thought, that just plays with my head, how terrified you'd have to be to leave your own home, to take your chances on the street, maybe living in a park, maybe in your car, often with your children, rather than spending another night with an abusive partner. So Four Voices came about because of that frustration with the fact that these women are not getting enough help. So I unashamedly stole some ideas from Orange Sky. I changed my orange shirt for a purple one. I changed my orange van for a purple one. And our purple vans are outfitted with technology. So Wi-Fi, mobile phones, laptop computers, printer, scanner, copier, big TV and Wi-Fi speakers, and also, importantly, coffee and tea making facilities. So what I wanted to do was create this environment to attract women for connection. And connection might be social, might be digital, it might be all sorts of other things, music, poetry, art, could be anything, whatever makes a woman feel invited and warm and accepted and not judged. And that's where we got to. That was a long answer to your first question.
But it's a big thing to start that. And it's a big topic to tackle. And I know our listeners, some of them have been there, and I know others are considering it. And I do know that the thing that I loved about your charity is it is providing a place for women to talk. And I do know that in this space of going through divorce and and for the people that are going through domestic violence, sometimes there's no one to talk to. And sometimes that's all you need, just a sounding board to go, am I crazy? Or is this normal? Or I'm not alone. And I think what you have created is just absolutely gobsmackingly amazing and definitely needed. There was a gap there, and I think you guys have filled it, which is fantastic. So can you give me some examples of how you guys go about? So you said you've got the vans, these big vans. What is it that you do for a typical day, for an example?
Well, we'll take a bunch of volunteers and go into a location where we know there are people that need help. Many of these are in lower socioeconomic areas because people come out and people are in I've been in Logan this morning, for instance, where there's so much homelessness and so many people in terrible financial predicaments that it's pretty easy to find someone to help. So we'll go to a place like that for about 3 or 4 hours and we'll see what we can do. So we'll always start with a cup of tea, coffee, Milo, biscuits, and we'll sit around and have a chat. So it's all about that warm environment that you create with a friend or a family member over a cup of tea or coffee. And that creates a conversation where you start to understand what's going on for a person. And once you have that conversation, your brain starts to think, oh, I can help that person. You know, like if you're homeless, you're not going to want counseling, are you? You're going to want food, you're going to want clothing, you're going to want shelter. If you're fleeing domestic violence, literally on the streets, you're terrified, you're going to want to get to safety. Mm-hmm. And if you are unemployed and desperate because you know you're going to end up on the street if you don't work, you want to get help with a resume or job search or whatever. So it's really trying to understand what's going on for that person and using the technology that we've got to problem solve.
That's brilliant. So I love the tech side of things is great because I do know a lot of people are too afraid to even search for help on their phones because then maybe they're getting tracked or watched. So I think that's brilliant. I know you guys had a campaign and we sent an email out to all our subscribers showing this story, this amazing story of this lady who came to you guys and you helped her turn everything around. Do you have any examples that you could share anonymously of some people that have been through with you guys?
Well, one that pops straight into my mind is a woman who came to us when we were outside another domestic violence organization and she had an appointment in there and she came out and she was crying because she was not eligible for their help. And that was because of funding issues. You know, we're funded for people from this age to this age, or we're funded for people with children from this age to this age, or we're funded for people who are in immediate danger. But if you're not in immediate danger, you don't get help. So our ethos is, I don't care. We don't care. If you say you need help, you need help. So she came out and she was in tears and I said to her, come over and have a cup of tea with us. And she said, okay, all right. So she came over, what's going on? She tells us that she was involved in domestic violence for 25 years. She got 2 young boys. One day he'd cut her hair off on one side. She said, I had beautiful long blonde hair. And just to be vengeful, he cut her hair off on one side while she was asleep and put that hair on her pillow. And when she woke up, she realized she had hair on one side and the rest of it was on the pillow. And she said, look, I experienced broken bones and bruises and all sorts of things. I put up with that. But that was just the last straw. And so I said, right, get out, which to me was so courageous because most of the women that we meet, the partner is the one that stays in the marital home or the home that they've shared. And she gets out sometimes with her children. So this is a massive difference. And as he left, he said, you can pay the $700 a week rent. You can pay the medical bills for the 2 kids, both of whom have special needs. You can pay the education. You can pay all the rest of it. Thinking that she was going to say, oh, no, it's okay, come back. And she didn't. And so with support from us, and I think having people in her corner as much as anything, she was able to, for instance, sublet her backyard. Don't tell your listeners this because it wasn't probably all that kosher with people like Centrelink maybe, but she was able to get extra income that way. She was able to think about the future in a different light. How am I going to get more income? How am I going to reduce my expenses? We helped her. I said to her, what are you good at? She said, I'm a great gardener. And I said, we can do something with that. So we had a graphic designer that made business cards for her and flyers and set up a Facebook page. And she started to distribute these flyers with the kids at weekends to try and get some business. And now she's got a little business that she has of gardening, which is amazing. And one of the best things about that story is that her 2 children, as I said, have special needs, but the younger one of the 2 is nonverbal. And so was 12 years of age and hadn't spoken. And 6 months after she had thrown the partner out, he started to talk.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, and I think now he's just making up for lost time because he talks nonstop. And for Christmas last year, we gave him a mobile phone, which to me is symptomatic of like, you've found your voice. Like she has found her voice and so too had this child. I just think it's a beautiful story. So it's really about how can we help this person? How can we, it's often about financial stuff. It's often about emotional support. And it's try to engage your brain about what are the practical and immediate things that you could do to help.
That story is so wonderful. It nearly made me cry. I think that every person who's listening is capable of going out on their own and creating a life for themselves. I totally believe that. But sometimes you just need someone to believe in you. And I do think, and somebody else being your little mini cheerleader and helping you just to get you started, to launch you off, particularly when you've had someone in your head going, you're useless, you can't do anything. And I think when you pointed out that financial abuse, that person was threatening to, I'm going to leave and you're going to have to pay for everything. So many people panic about that and it's a big, big deal. But I do also think it's amazing that your charity doesn't turn people away. I think that's great because there's a lot of people who slip through the cracks, who don't fit the legal aid, they don't fit some of the other domestic violence charities, or their time was up with that charity. So I think it's amazing, Jo, that's going on.
I think that like 70% of the women that we see don't reach out for help. They don't go to the police, they don't go to legal aid or to a doctor's surgery or to a mental health practitioner or a drug and alcohol clinic because of fear, fear that the perpetrator is going to get more aggressive or abusive, fear that they're going to be interrogated and judged and maybe deemed ineligible for help. And if they're deemed ineligible for help once they've been re-traumatized by the retelling of their story, then they're just spat out onto the street trying to look for their own dignity and survival. And we see so many women that go, I'm not going there. I'm not going to the police. I'm not going here, there, or everywhere because I'm sick of being judged. And what I try and do, or our volunteers try and do, is be that intermediary where, it doesn't matter what you've done, what choices you've made. We want to be there for you. And some people would call that advocacy. I hate big words. Being an advocate means that, you're kind of in somehow a more superior position where we're not, we don't call the people we support clients or customers because that to me signifies something that's transactional. We call them partners because, we're entering a partnership with the person that needs help from which we both come out as better people. I've met some extraordinary women on the streets who have such courage and such resilience to get up every day, maybe from a tent that they're sleeping in a forest with their kids, scared of child safety coming and swooping in and taking the kids away. Women that are in this kind of crisis, getting up every day and putting one foot in front of the other because they're tenacious enough to look after the children. It's just, that to me is fearlessness and just courage.
So people can access your services through the vans, finding out where the vans are. Are there any other services they can access, or is it just through the vans?
Yeah, so we have vans now in Brisbane, a couple in Brisbane, and also on the Gold Coast and in Sydney and Western Sydney. So my grand plan is to get vans across the country because we're scratching the surface of the need. And I really want to be that on the streets intermediary, helping people access other services, but in a lovely, welcoming, non-judgmental way. A number of the women that we meet, we can't fix their issues in a 4-hour shift. We can't take them. The most soul-destroying work that we do is to try and get somebody homeless off the streets in this current crisis where, housing is affordable to the people that we deal with and is not particularly available anyway. So to come home to your own home and knowing you've left someone on the street is just more than I can bear sometimes. So we offer a phone support service where we've now got about 150 volunteers around the country. I'm so excited. We've got a few in Perth and one in Alice Springs, which is cool, and Darwin and Melbourne. So places where we don't have the vans who ring people up, so ring people up that are in crisis. They might be living in violence or they might have escaped it, but, in awful situations. And they call up to say g'day, and they call up to say, how's your week going, lovely? And debrief, help them debrief their week, help them laugh, cry, whatever emotion that comes out, and then help them with any kind of practical support that we can give them. We can give people emergency food vouchers, mobile phones, clothing. We can source, during the floods, we were sourcing people furniture when it was wrecked during the cyclone, whatever it might be. So we can do things like that. And so on the phone, it's really about developing a relationship with the person that they can start to rely on the fact that there's somebody out that may never meet, but that cares enough about them to call in. So unlike Lifeline, where, you're in crisis and and you ring Lifeline, a wonderful service that will help de-escalate you. But then in another month's time, you might be in crisis again. You ring Lifeline again. You speak to somebody completely different. Mm-hmm. You got to retell your story over again. So what we're trying to do is provide the same person that rings you every week. How you going, Laura? What's happened for you this week? How was little Johnny's appointment at the school fair last? That sort of thing. So I think that people are feeling that they're a little more appreciated and cared about than they might have otherwise been. And I reckon that we can expand that service nationally too, because again, we're scratching the surface of the need. We support about 200 women a week. Through that phone support, we could support thousands.
I think that's amazing. That is probably so needed. And I think that's brilliant that you guys are doing that. I'm so excited about it. I think I actually came to something of yours earlier this year and I met one of the ladies who does the phone calling and she just sounded amazing. And I just thought, wow, I wish this had been around. So I think it's so needed. So let's talk about that then.
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? Or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex? Then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist. Get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist, along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast, will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
So we've got, our listeners, they're We've got lawyers who listen. We've got people going through it in crisis who listen. We've got people who are going through the family court who listen. We've got very well-off people and some very not well-off people. What options for help can our listeners, if they don't need your service, what can they do to help your service? Because a lot of people want to. They've been through it and they do not want to go through it again, but they want to help those people behind them going through it. What kind of things can our listeners do?
Where our service is constrained only by two things, and that is volunteers to support us and funding, simple as like most charities. So we've got now 600 volunteers across the country and very few paid staff. So we are always on the lookout for new volunteers. So volunteers that can help us around our physical services in the locations I mentioned, mainly Southeast Queensland and Sydney, Western Sydney, but also the phone support service. We are always looking for more people that can help. If people have lived experience, it can be really raw and, to use the word you use, triggering. So we try and make sure that there's enough distance between when they had that lived experience to when they help, because everybody that's been through this sort of scenario want to help. At some point or other, it's like, I've got to help someone not go through the same as what I did. So it's really got to be the right timing for them. And if it's not, we use people behind the scenes. We've got people that have admin skills, HR skills, or social media skills, or, accounting, or all the sorts of skills that you need to run a normal business.
Yeah.
We use volunteers for, so that we can make sure that any funding that we get is given to or helping out people that really need it. And look, in terms of the other component that we need is funding. So we are always on the lookout for funding. We provide emergency food vouchers, which cost us $25 just to be able to give somebody on the street immediate help to get food for the day. We provide refurbished phones, which cost about $50 to $100, so that women who have left their phone at home or who can't use the phone that they've got for what you said before, for fear of being tracked or stalked, can have a safe mobile phone that they can use. And then, we're always looking for organizations or people that can help us with more money. We get corporate sponsors. We're trying to get more philanthropists that say, this is a really cool idea, I want to help. And then, I think part of it really is to get the word out there. So I'm always looking for people to increase our social media presence. We're a well-kept secret still. And to be able to get the word out and say, hey, this is a really cool idea, share our posts, jump on our website, all the stuff that makes an organization all of a sudden start to get noticed. I will talk to anybody. As you can hear, I just rabbit on for ages, but I'm very interested in getting out there to talk. I'll talk to schools or Rotary clubs or organizations to just try and get people to understand what's going on. It's a crisis out there, Laura. I mean, just this morning, I would have spoken to at least 12 people who are literally on the streets. There was one woman who had no shoes and she'd cut her feet to the point where she should have had stitches. She hadn't had a shower for I don't know how long. She had no winter clothes. She had a short skirt on and a t-shirt. And like these are the people we meet all the time, and sleeping in a tent, it's awful what you see. So to be able to tell people what's going on under their noses, and politicians as well, like trying to lobby politicians, this is really what's happening in your electorates. And although there's, I think domestic violence is tabled a lot more than it used to be. Still not well understood. There's still, a lot of silence, a lack of real understanding of the issues. And we as an organization really want to ensure that women find their voice when they're ready, but that we represent them as a voice in the meantime.
Wow, that's powerful. So if our listeners today, if they've got no funds to give at the moment, but they want to volunteer, they can go on your website. If they want to support you by just, if it's safe for them, following your social media or your Facebook, what should they be looking for? What's your Instagram or Facebook handle?
For Voices AU, I believe it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'll put those links in the show notes, everybody, so you can follow them along as well. So there you go. If you're listening today and you want to do something, if it's not the right time for you yet, if it's too close to home to be able to actually go out there and physically do some of the stuff, like Joe said, there's things you can do, like helping with admin and things like that. Or if you've got corporate sponsorship, that would be amazing. But just also letting other people know this service exists, because I think it's an amazing service and it's something that Mum and I can't do, but we know that it's needed. So I think it's amazing that's happening. Now, Joe, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions before you go, because I know I've held you up a little bit. But so you've already just touched on homelessness, and I know it is a massive, it is probably one of the main issues for people going through domestic violence or going through separation. They're either separated under one roof, stuck with the person, or they choose to be homeless, or they're sleeping in their cars. And you're out there day to day talking to these people, as you said. What do you think the one most misunderstood thing is about people going through homelessness? What do you see is people just don't get it?
I think that there's a lot of commentary around, well, why don't they just get a job? Or if they didn't put a needle in there or a bottle down their throat, then they'd be able to afford a home. A myth that I am determined to bust, because it is so much more difficult than that. You're on the street and your job is to survive. And there's not a chance that you'll be able to be ready for employment anytime soon. This lady, I digress all the time. I hope you're okay, but shut me up.
Go.
I have this lady that is living in her car, has been for the last 2 years. She got some mental health issues, so she can't live with anybody and prefers to be in isolation. So she comes to us quite regularly now for the same reason. She doesn't get judged and she trusts us, and we can help her out with bits and pieces. But we try and get her into accommodation. And it's hard when you're on a disability pension, because it's so little money and rental prices are so ridiculously high. And I said to her one day in desperation, I said, I can't go home tonight knowing that I have not helped you. Is there anything that you need today? And she said, Joe, I have been attacked. I've been robbed since I've been homeless. And she said, after living in domestic violence for 15 years, that's preferable. But she said, one thing that is worse than all of that is that when I try to go to sleep every night in my car, 1,000 cockroaches crawl all over me. And it's worse than any assault than I've ever experienced. So those little German cockroaches, I looked in her car and you could see that they were everywhere. She said, I've tried sprays, I've tried everything. So I thought, we can do something about that. So we organized professional pest control.
Oh, wow.
And it was nothing. It was like it was a $400 pest control treatment. But she thought she'd won the lottery because she had the ability then to sleep in a car with some degree of dignity.
Wow.
It's that kind of misunderstanding of homelessness. People can go through that kind of misery. And let me tell you that one of the biggest myths, and one that I get really cross about, is the whole, oh, well, if they didn't put a needle up there, they might get off the streets. That drug taking, which is an epidemic, is more often the byproduct of homelessness than the precursor to it. So I have heard from being on the streets for so long that methamphetamine, or the common name for that is ice, suppresses hunger. So if you're on the street and you're fighting for every meal, it does take that hunger away.
Wow.
And the other thing that it does is obviously makes you vigilant. So you can stay awake, so you don't get robbed and you don't get attacked. So this epidemic of drug taking in the homeless community, this happened organically. What kid at 6 years of age gets up in the morning and says, "Hey, Mum, what I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a drug addict or a prostitute." Or no kid does that. Life throws shit at you, you get stuff thrown at you that you have to deal with. And unfortunately, many people are pushed down that road because stuff happens. So I really think there's a lot of misconception about homelessness that we have an obligation to better understand.
Lastly, what gives you hope when you feel like your work's getting too heavy? Because gosh darn it, you sound like you have a lot of heavy work. So what gives you hope when you do go home after being out there helping these people?
It's the little things. I have very poor boundaries. I tell all my volunteers, you can't take any phone calls after 6 o'clock at night. You make sure that you create space for yourself. So I don't always apply my own recommendations. And this one night, I got a phone call from a woman who was in drastic circumstances, living in violence and unable to escape, because every time she did, he would pull her back. And I got this phone call at 10:20 at night. And I looked at my phone, saw who it was, and I thought, I really shouldn't be picking this up. And then I thought, if I don't, what about if this is a serious crisis? So I'll pick it up. And I picked it up, and she said in a really whispered voice, "Is it you, Joe?" And I said, "Yes, Tonya. What's the matter?" And she said, I said, "Are you in trouble?" And she said, No. Okay. And I said, "Why are you speaking? Why are you whispering?" "Oh, because I don't want anyone to hear me." I said, "Well, what do you want? You need something?" And she said, "I just wanted to say goodnight to somebody nice." I got off the phone and cried, and I thought, that's why you do it. You do it for that reason, knowing that she knows there's somebody out there that really does care. And we're now trying to create this huge network of people who care enough to provide that sort of comfort to even one woman, and that gives me a lot of hope that as a society, we've got so many people that want to do something nice for somebody else. And if more of us can do that, then, oh my God, this would be a much better country to live in.
Oh, wow. You're so right. Wow. I tried very hard not to cry to all these stories. But look, I think the work you are doing is just immense, and I cannot thank you enough. And anybody who's listening today, if you want to either donate, participate, volunteer, go to the website, or just share the information about Four Voices, I think that's going to, if we can all push it and get it out there and volunteer, do whatever we can to get this service going bigger, because it's 100% needed. And with you running the ship, Joe, you come from a complete place of honest, you just care. And I think that is going to shine through and has shined through your services. And I think that's so important as well. So I thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. And Mum and I will do as much as we can to keep sharing the information for Four Voices. Just before we go, what's your website, Jones, that people can jump onto?
It's just Four Voices, not the number 4voices.org.au.
Perfect. Okay, so everybody go have a look and send us an email if you want to get in touch with Joe, if you can't find the information on how to do that. And send us an email if you've donated, let us know. And I do know we had a listener who reached out to us and said, "Oh, I volunteered for Four Voices," and that's great. So
that's so cool.
They were already associated with you guys, so they were stoked that we were on board. But yes, so thank you, Joe, for letting us be a part of it, and thank you for the service you do to the community. I think it's amazing, and I can't wait to see where this goes, because I think this could be massive and a solution to a problem that people are ignoring. So thanks, Joe.
My pleasure, Laura. Thanks so much for having me.
If you feel that you are being triggered, you can call Lifeline, or you can also call 1-800-RESPECT.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.